Welcome to the Leading Conversations podcast, sponsored by the Excel Leadership Network. On each episode, JD Pairing will have conversations with church planting pastors and leaders from around the country. You can learn more about how to connect with Excel at the end of this podcast. Let's join JD now and listen in on this leading conversation.
Luke Allen is our special guest today on our Excel podcast. Luke is a church planter, church planting leader, someone who has planted churches out of his church, is the COO of Excel Leadership Network, is an incredible man, incredible leader, and we are pleased to have you with us today. Luke, thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks, JD. And I think before we get started, I just want to thank you and your leadership for what you've done through Excel and just all the comrades we have all over the place doing the hard work of planting churches. It's a great company to keep for sure.
Well, that's great to hear. I'm so glad you're with us. Hey, I want to start out. You were a church planting, the son of a church planter. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right on.
Talk just a little bit about what that was like.
My dad did not grow up in a Christian home. His grandmother took him to church, got saved when he was a teenager, went to the Vietnam War, came back with his heart really stirred for Jesus and felt a call to ministry to go plant churches. So he did a little Bible education, no network or denomination really even, parachuted in to New Orleans and started planting churches. So I was born in Hammond, Louisiana, the first plant. Then we went to New Orleans and subsequent places after that. So all I ever knew growing up was church planting the old school way, moving to a neighborhood, start knocking on doors, winning people to Christ. Some of the earliest memories I have of me tagging along with Dad as he was sharing the gospel door to door in our neighborhood and seeing supernatural encounters of, people who had said, that they've been wrestling with this faith issue. And if God sent them a preacher to tell them about Jesus, they would come to faith. And so I just remember those very vividly. That's what it was like. My dad was kind of a serial church planter.
Now, from what I know of you, Luke, your dad was a pastor, church planter, but you don't seem to have a very deep father wound. Which a lot of us are scared that our kids are going to have. Oh no, they're growing up, their whole life is setting up and taking down on Sunday. How'd your parents keep that from being a problem? I don't know, maybe you had a trouble being a PK, but I haven't picked that up from you.
No, I loved every minute of it. It was some very difficult and hard times, but my parents always included us in the process, in the mission. It was not them leaving us to go do ministry or mission. They brought us with them. And so that was all we ever got to know. We got to see some cool places and meet some incredible people. And I've got friends all over the U.S. because of that, and missionaries all over the world, because we were just always, it was just part of it. It was never, let's leave the kids with the grandparents while we go do ministry work. We all did it together. And I saw that it was very real and genuine for my parents. If you've been around the church for very long, you can see it can be a pretty scary place. What's the thing, the phrase that sheep bite, and they do. I saw in my dad, the two things that I really try to replicate in my life. He had an incredible amount of courage to say what needed to be said, no matter what the fallout was. And he had this incredible amount of compassion, no matter how bad it got and whatever they said about him. He still loved those people. And so just as a little kid watching that, I was like, okay, well, this has got to be the real deal. And so that's what I saw from him. And then, I don't know if this is jumping ahead, but when I told him that I was planning on planting a church and asked him for his blessing, he tried to talk me out of it for a couple of weeks. I think he just knew what a slog it can be sometimes, just so much work. Yeah.
How did that go? Your dad trying to talk you out of planting?
Well, I met him at a Cracker Barrel. I was living in Dallas, and he was in still in Louisiana. So we met halfway at a Cracker Barrel in Tyler, Texas, and over the
All good
cornbread.
things come from a Cracker Barrel in Tyler, Texas. That's where life happens.
Dude, imagine the country songs that have been written in that Cracker Barrel. So I was surprised. I told him I really felt I was working in a mega church as a youth pastor. I had 12 or 13 staff that worked under me. It was a great job. And just from that, he just really tried to talk me out of it. He just said, why would you spend all these years trying to plan something new when you've got offers to go take established churches and da-da-da? And I just said, Dad, I think God's made me for this. And taught me my whole life has been training ground to go do this. So, he gave me his blessing by the end of dinner, but still, even after we planted, he would still send any church vacancies, First Baptist, wherever. Hey, you got to send your resume in.
Wow. That's interesting.
Yes.
Just by the way, if you're listening to this and you're a church planter, we get texts and emails all the time from First Baptist or First Press or wherever. If you're looking for another shot, another place to go, there's some openings. Just let us know. Hey, before we get into your church planting story, you talked about your dad's courage and compassion. What have you done as a parent to help your kids stay close to Jesus and stay in the process and not have those wounds?
Man, I think, JD, first of all, it's just, committing them to Jesus again and again. He loves them more than I ever could, for sure. And just to be real strongly disciplined in time off and letting them know that they're first before the church planting stuff. I want to love and honor them. And so they have a voice at the table, the same of the way that my dad did with us, including them in the story, asking them what they think about adding services or moving locations. My dad firmly believed in the power of prayer. And so when we would start a new church or when our living room got filled, I remember this time in New Orleans where we drove to this strip club in the morning, and it was closed for the day. And we sat in the parking lot in his old blue station wagon, and we prayed that God would shut the strip club down and that it'd become a church. And I just remember I was 5 or 6. I don't know. I thought he was crazy. And we would just show up, several mornings a week and just pray that God would shut it down. And sure enough, the strip club closed. We bought the place, rehabbed it, and made it a church. And I just that belief that God's going to do the supernatural was just like woven in our story. And we were Baptist on top of that, which maybe you don't see a lot of that. And I just remember that. And I still look for those kind of God moments with our kids and celebrating what God's doing and letting them know they have a part of the redemptive work, that we're doing in planting.
I love this conversation. We've been talking about Cracker Barrel in Tyler, Texas, strip club turned into a church. This is great. Now you've planted several churches out of Covenant there. I've asked you this before, but how'd you get that first one? How'd you talk the people into it? Because most churches, 95% of churches do not reproduce. And often it's just because they can't get that first one out there. How did you do that?
Well, I looking back, we didn't do it very well. We made a lot of mistakes. We just planted, you've heard the term, we planted pregnant. We planted with this idea that we wanted to plant several churches. And so the guys we brought on staff initially kind of had that vision that we wanted to be a part of we want to be a catalytic church planting movement. And we want to be part of that. And so our part, and a lot of the journey we went through denominational networks was just so hard in doing that. We decided to stick the course and blaze a trail for other people to come And so it was preparing our people. It was diligently planning and saving money for it. It was bringing guys on staff. If you know me very long, church planters are my heroes. They just really are. And so I brag on them every Sunday from the pulpit, and what an incredible work those guys are doing. Even some of these guys in our network, Scott Lackey and Raymond, I've talked about them from the stage, just this incredible work they're doing and starting churches during a pandemic. And so it's just a high value at our church. We talk about it. We spend a lot of money on it. So it in other places.
That is really cool to hear. You've planted 4 churches out of Covenant. Is that correct?
Right. So far 4. And 2 of those churches, the churches we planted in our sister city, our church is in Bossier City, across the river, Shreveport. We planted a guy, and then we planted Stephen Partain and them in New Orleans. And both of them are kind of on the cusp of planting another church out of their church. So our church is pretty excited that we could actually see, church planting grandbabies here pretty soon.
Wow. Hey, give us the top 2 or 3 tips you would suggest for a church that's thinking about multiplying. What are 2 or 3 must-dos or things you've done that really made a difference?
Keep a kingdom perspective. It's just way bigger. What God's doing around the world and in your city is way bigger than you could ever do. Like, we started thinking about the 500,000 people within a 20-mile radius of where we were. And, if God filled our building 10 times on a Sunday, we couldn't reach all those people. We're going to have to plant churches so we can reach people. So it was a kingdom mindset from the very beginning. It was an empowering culture. A lot of people are just real scared to let other people try to preach or teach, or anybody, an intern that comes and, has a fire, wants to do this. I'll work with him and give him the stage and let him preach. So we just started doing that and supporting them. So I think that's it. Just having the kingdom mindset, making the decision I read some article, I think Ed Stetzer did, that said every pastor, he interviewed like 400 pastors. This is maybe 10 years ago. And he asked them, when will your church be ready to plant another church out of it? And I don't know, like 90 something percent all said, we'll be ready when we grow 20% more. So the 100-person church, the 400-person church, and the 4,000-person church all thought they needed to grow 20% more before they planted another church. And we felt the same way. We were running about 250 when we sent 50 people out there, maybe more than 50. And it gutted us a little bit. But God filled in those holes with new people and new converts and blessed both works.
You have thought about planting again.
Yes, I would love to plant again. Yes.
Well, why not?
God has wired me with this like small a apostolic gift of starting new things. I don't know if you call that spiritual entrepreneurship or whatever. I've started several businesses even before ministry. But my wife's a homebody, and she grew up in the same house her entire life. And she, every time I float the idea, she's like, nope, I'm not moving. So unless you're going to leave and go plant it and come back home during the week, then this is not a thing that we're doing. And she, of course, would do whatever God was leading us to do. But I think that's really grounded me from wanting to react by going to plant more churches. Part of that allure is probably any church, the people just don't grow as fast as you want them to grow. And the church doesn't take the shape that you had intended it to take. And so I just want to go try it again. So anyway, I've been in my current church 10 years. We haven't moved.
For years, I, as somebody with a similar gifting and a similar spouse, just struggled with not going out and doing it again. And I talked to my apostolic friends, and they would all complain that it's hard to do. There's no models for this among the Anglo population in the U.S. Anyway, I know some of the different ethnic groups, they have the catalytic church planters, but there's no models. it finally hit me that if you're an apostle, you don't really complain about models. You just go make crap up as you're moving. So you've made some steps to get your apostolic rock and roll fantasies out there. What have you done to say, hey, I'm apostolic, I can still do this and have a home base here, so my wife's happy?
Yeah. JD, you and I had a conversation maybe 4 years ago at a Texas Rangers game, the old stadium. We were sitting up there in the little all-you-can-eat seats, probably not enjoying the food, but we were sitting in the air condition, which is important in July. And I remember
all you can eat, by the way, is just have food that nobody wants seconds.
That's exactly what it is. Yes. The only thing you can really stomach up there is the peanuts. I remember having that conversation with you and just saying, man, JD, if there's any way that I could partner with Excel in some way that I could help serve the other church planters that are planting these new churches, then I would love to have some part in that. And so that's really where we started. And I just, started coaching some guys and then coaching our guys that we sent out. And then that became formal a couple of years ago by taking an actual position with Excel on an operations kind of side. But still, I just find great joy in being an encourager and a cheerleader for these other guys. I just know how hard it is, how alone you feel. And so maybe 10 hours a week, I'm on the phone with other planters, just listening and encouraging them. And that scratches that apostolic itch every time. And most times I send them money as soon as I hang up the phone. So I'm finding great comfort in doing that.
How did you practically make that happen?
Well, I talked to you first, and you didn't roll out any kind of big plan. You said, "What do you want to do?" And I threw out a few things, and you said, "Why don't you start doing that next week?" And so I did. That's about how it went. I did raise some money. I knew I was going to have to take, if I was going to create 10 to 15 hours a week to do this, I was going to have to take less salary from the church. So I went and raised some funds from some people that I knew loved church planting and loved me. They were happy to, and they've still been going strong for a couple of years. Raised part of my salary outside the church so that I could free up some time to do this. And the church won because, you still work basically 2 full-time jobs, what it feels like. The church wins. We have a little extra money on that side of things to hire other staff. And then Excel, and then I win because I get to do both things. And my wife wins because she gets to stay in the same city.
So it's a win-win-win.
Win. Yep.
If somebody has an apostolic gift, what would you suggest to them then? Go ahead. What would you say?
Well, I think some people are called to be serial church planters, and I would just, ask them to really figure out what that looks like. Like you said, there is not a model, and it's not always enjoyable. You see Paul, as he's a apostolic planter, maybe the key guy we look to, the Apostle Paul. And, in every letter, he's like, man, my heart longs to be with the people he just left. Like, he really loved those people. So I think that's part of it. Just praying through exactly what God wants you to do, and just expanding your mindset to know that you can do both. You can still shepherd a local flock, and you can take steps and help becoming a catalytic church, part of a catalytic movement of church planting.
I'm going to ask you just to give us your best shot on leadership or anything, what you want to say. But before we do that, I do want to point out that we've talked about Cracker Barrel in Tyler, Texas. We've talked about the strip club that became a church. And if you've noticed, Luke keeps calling it Excel. And that's fine, because in the South, it's called Excel. If you're in the West Coast or the Northeast, it's Excel. there's no right answer for that, but I do want to say, however you want to pronounce it is fine. But Luke, give us your best shot. What do you want to say to us as leaders? You got the floor.
I've been thinking a lot and, reading a lot as we posture as a church to move into somewhat of a normal setting. A couple weeks ago, a lot of us planters got together in Arizona. We were talking about this, and one of our XL guys, Brian Becker, talked about this we were having little discussion tables at an event about what should we expect as we move towards normalcy. And one of the things he said really stuck with me. I've been really thinking about that, is that all of us are going to be replanting again. We're all replanting in some sense. People are gone, resources have changed, policies are different, people are different. So we're planting again, but yet this time we're planting when everybody's walking through a different stage of grief. Some people have lost people they love. Some people are sad about the people that have, left the faith. And I think that's true. I think most people that I'm encountering in our church, which we need to be aware of, is, kind of what stage of grief. Things aren't always the same like it used to be. So I think that's one of it. And two, the ultimate priority of our life as a leader is that we've got to be in love with Jesus. That has got to drive everything we do. I'm a strategy guy. I've got whiteboards all over the office. I love to strategize and write and plan and brainstorm. But if we don't love Jesus, that's going to be exposed. And I think that has been exposed through the pandemic, the stress that's been put on pastors. I mean, the crazy stress people have been walking in. Have exposed, and a lot of pastors have quit. And I just think so much of that could have been avoided if the pastor's heart just loves Jesus and making loving Jesus like the most important thing that we're after. And the meetings can wait and the whiteboards can wait. We have got to get our heart connected to Jesus. I heard somebody say it, like, I don't remember who it was. Somebody I was reading, that most of us live out of a canal kind of posture, where, what God's doing is just kind of running through us instead of a reservoir. And I like that reservoir kind of mentality, where we spend time in the presence of God for so long that it just overflows everywhere that we go. And that's what's going to get us through this trying season and the next one that's to come. When Jesus restored Peter, that was his question, right? If you love me, well, then go feed my sheep. And I feel like most leaders I've worked for and myself, what a great temptation it is, even for me, is to go get a lot of ministry done without ever seeking the heart of God in the matter, without walking with him. And so that's what I just have to reorient my own vision every day, is, spending time in the secret place, following after the heart of God. And then from that, just this overflow of joy takes over my life. And then I can do ministry from that. And I just think that's how ministry is supposed to work. It's how it worked with the Apostle Paul. It's how it worked with the early church. The explosion of joy is what grew the church, not their, sound doctrine. Sound doctrine is important, of course, but walking with Jesus and loving him, I think, is the source to all of this.
Thank you so much, Luke. That is an incredible reminder. And what I really appreciate about you is you live that out. You're the real deal. The legacy of your father, the courage, the compassion, and I just really appreciate that. And I think we're just going to make a switch. From now on, we're going to start doing our discovery centers at Cracker Barrels, where we sit down and say, is this really what you want to do?
It's a great question. And that, later I asked my dad about that very thing. I asked him, I was like, Dad, 10 years in, 5 years in, why'd you try to talk me out of that? And he just said, son, I knew if I could talk you out of it, you weren't going to make it. Anyway, if I could talk you out of it, you weren't going to survive the damage that ministry and church planting does. And so that was his strategy, and I guess it worked.
Well, thank you. Thank you for being part of Excel and Excel.
I've never noticed that people say it different. I think it's just the speed at which I talk is how I pronounce it.
Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you, JD.
Thanks for joining the Leading Conversations podcast. We hope that you found it both helpful and encouraging. At Excel Leadership Network, our focus is on the church planter rather than the church. If you'd like to find out more about us, visit our webpage at excelnetwork.org. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss any future episodes. See you next time with another Leading Conversation.